Good afternoon, and I'm Hamish Tyler, and I am the Visual and Performing Arts Coordinator Administrator and the Administrator for KMST Television. And this is the first in a series of programs in which we'd like to highlight some local legends. And we thought that it was especially appropriate that we have two local legends, if you like, in nonprofit, non-commercial radio, educational radio. And we have two different generations of local programmers. And to my immediate left here, we're very pleased to have with us Andrew Caspari, who is an administrator for the British Broadcasting Corporation. And exactly what is that, Andrew?
Okay, I'm the Senior Commissioning Editor responsible for programming in English on the World Service. On World Service Radio. So I select and program a whole range of material that goes out to our audiences of between 35 and 40 million people worldwide.
Well,
lucky me.
What a job. And Reed Cavner, and Reed is has had all kinds of experience locally in radio and communications. And specifically, what are you doing now, Reed?
Right now, in my broadcast life, I'm working as a newscaster for the Quality News Network in Monterey.
Oh, okay. And you were the programmer and station manager for the student station, KSPB,
right.
And both of you worked for KSPB, and Andrew did couple of years ago, right?
Yeah, just about 27 years ago.
A few years ago as well. And I might also add that both of you are famed actors at one time or another on the stage.
One probably much better than me, but
the whole broadcast, the BBC, and incidentally, Andrew, those of you out there in the area, especially the Peninsula area, that are used to hearing the British Broadcasting Corporation on KSPB, Andrew was the principal link, and Andrew is one of the reasons why the BBC is still on KSPB. Andrew, last night we were going over some really intriguing programming that the BBC is responsible for example, in Africa.
Yeah.
West Africa in particular.
West Africa in particular. One of our biggest audiences for the World Service is in Africa, and in West Africa in particular. So in Nigeria, for example, we have over 7 million listeners. In Ghana, we have 3.7 million listeners. And across Africa, it's a very, very important service, I think, for a number of reasons. Firstly, there are quite a lot of areas in Africa that don't have enormous amounts of developed radio, particularly in the area of news and information that is costly, difficult to produce, and so on. And the BBC has always made a particular point of producing programs that link the whole of Africa together. So Network Africa in the morning, Focus on Africa in the afternoon, mix that in with world news and events that we do at other times. So this has given us a huge foothold and a very important role really in Africa because there are very few other ways in which people can link up the continent. So, for example, next year we go and cover the African Cup of Nations, well, I call it football, you call it soccer, tournament, which is the biggest sporting event in Africa by some considerable distance. And the interest in that is immense. But it's actually the BBC who ends up bringing Africa's biggest sporting event to Africa, which is kind of interesting. And of course we broadcast in a number of languages in Africa. So we broadcast in Swahili, we broadcast in Hausa, and we broadcast in French, we broadcast in Portuguese, as well as the English services.
Well, how would that work? So that you would be broadcasting in Swahili at Number 1 Bush in downtown London? Or are you actually there?
We're doing both now. For quite a long time, the language services, because the BBC broadcasts in 33 languages worldwide, and for quite a long time, the language services would be based in London. So it was slightly a sort of empire kind of thing.
Right.
That was partly because for technical reasons, and of course in quite a lot of countries, there wasn't the freedom of speech or of expression where we were broadcasting. So it was important to have those services based in London. Now, as it's become technically more possible and societies have developed and it becomes democratically more possible, what we're trying to do is have a balance of people based in London and people based in Africa. So, for example, we have a large number of people for the Swahili service who are based in Nairobi, as well as the people based in London. Or for the Hindi service, we have a huge office in Delhi, as well as in London. And we've got much more of a balance now. With the language services in West Africa, the Hausa service, for example, is partly based in Abuja and partly based in London. So it's a balance of the two.
How would you go about comparing the BBC to, say, CNN or some of the American-based broadcasting networks?
Well, I think I should be careful what I say about
No, you don't have to be careful at all. You just need to be truthful.
I think our specialism is twofold. One is it's genuinely global. If it's happening and it's important anywhere in the world, we will cover it. I think the second thing is the amount of depth that we're able to go into. Our, as it were, clock, the way in which we schedule, isn't based on a 20-minute cycle or even a 30-minute cycle. It's based much more on having a bulletin of news at the top of the hour, 6 minutes at the top of the hour, and 2 minutes at the bottom of the hour, and then being able to a range of different kinds of programming in between. So we have time to do longer interviews, more detailed reports, or specialist programs in science or in culture or in sports. So we try to portray ourselves as a news and knowledge network, a news and knowledge proposition, and concentrate as well on some areas of radio craft which still work.
Right, right. But now, for a lot of us over here, we just say, well, that's because your government's subsidized. You can do that sort of thing. You are, in a sense, aren't you?
Yes. Oh, yeah. We are funded by what we call grant in aid. So we receive a grant each year from the British Foreign Office. We don't have any political control from the British Foreign Office. In other words, that is given to us as a bundle of money.
I see.
And we get on and do the job.
There are no strings attached to that.
There are no strings attached to that. Absolutely no strings attached to that.
Right.
Each year we have to tell them what it is that we're planning to do and if we're planning major changes in services. So, for example, we're opening up Arabic television this year, and that involved reprioritizing some services, money away from one thing towards another. But what the content is of Arabic, the fact that we have Arabic television is part of our bid to the British Foreign Office. What we broadcast on Arabic television is entirely our business. So yes, we do have that subsidy. On the other hand, we don't have the ability to raise large amounts of money commercially, but having that subsidy in some financial climates, knowing what your income is going to be is always a nice thing to do.
Yes.
Of course, the way in which government funding goes, you're always expected to have less the following year and still do the same amount, if not more things.
We're familiar with that.
That's
with that
funding.
cycle as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Reed, looking back on your experiences with the BBC when you were over at KSPB, I'm sure that many a time you came across some of the folks that preferred to hear student programming or wanted to hear the BBC programming. Tell us about that. Tell us about some of those moments. I can remember some are quite humorous, as a matter of fact. Yeah.
Well, there are people who appreciate one or the other, absolutely, and there's a pretty distinct difference in those demographics that people wouldn't be that surprised to hear about. But as we were speaking about before, the need for locally produced programming is huge, and there are folks who recognize that. But the trade-off, not always, but a lot of the time, is production quality. It has to be. It's a funding thing. It's a resource thing, and but the people who appreciated the local student programming in this case really appreciated it, and it kind of proves that with the right recipe, they don't have to be mutually exclusive. You can have very high quality, locally produced programming. It can happen, and it's what people, I think, really want, as long as you can share it with an international perspective.
We had a very interesting experience when we visited Andrew in London, and we were at number 1 Bush Street, and we were visiting a couple of the studios, and then the Reverend Jesse Jackson came in and sort of preempted our visit. But that was really interesting, and from my experience, just to see the multiplicity of different ethnic groups and different people all moving in and out with the journalistic job to do was just phenomenal. Reed, tell us a little bit. Reed, by the way, is a brilliant student and has encountered a couple of rough spots the last couple of years.
That's right.
And has turned the lemon into the proverbial lemonade and has done something that I think, in terms of best practices and in terms of encouragement, Reed, to all of our constituency out there. You tell us a little bit about what you've been through.
Well, what you're referring to is a little over about a year and a half ago, I was diagnosed with Ewing sarcoma, which is a form of pediatric cancer. And in the cancer world, pediatric doesn't necessarily mean the age at which it hits. It's more of a classification. So Ewing sarcoma, it's a bone cancer that strikes almost exclusively between 10 and 30 years old. And so I went through 14 rounds of chemotherapy, and in the middle of that there was some pretty invasive surgery that I had to go to New York for at Memorial Sloan Kettering Hospital, which is the granddaddy of cancer treatment centers. And through all of this, to be completely honest, I was bored. I couldn't commit to anything because of my regular treatment schedule. And always the chance of having to go to the hospital at the last minute. I couldn't take a job, I couldn't take classes. So I went to work for myself, and I started raising money for Ewing sarcoma research, which is one of the many types of pediatric cancers that is underfunded. So the Ewing's Research Foundation has been in existence for a little over a year, and a week from tomorrow, this is October the 13th I'm referring to, at Carmel Sunset Center, we're hosting Rising Stars Raising Funds, which is a showcase of talented kids, kind of child prodigy types. And they're going to be coming out for kind of a kids helping kids kind of evening. They have all sorts of different talents and have all reached a certain level of notoriety within their given fields. And it should be a lot of fun. It'll be a lot of fun.
And that's at the Sunset Center.
At Sunset Center, that's right.
Next Saturday,
October the
night.
13th.
What are some of the groups there, some of the bands?
Well, we have, it's not all music.
Okay.
Our opening act is going to be a 9-year-old from Los Angeles named Sydney Park. And Sydney was a quarterfinalist on America's Got Talent. She's been on The Tonight Show. She had a recurring role on the Disney Channel program That's So Raven. And she's appeared in a few other TV shows. And she's a stand-up comedian.
Oh my goodness.
A funny one at that, 9 years old, right? And then after her is Mark Yu, who is an 8-year-old also from the Los Angeles area, who is a true prodigy. They just, the National Geographic Channel did a documentary on his brain last week.
Oh my goodness.
They're studying his brain because he's one of these kids that is truly a phenomenon. So he's a concert pianist. Then we're having a group from the Bay Area called Till Dawn. They're an a cappella choir. And then Susan May, who is a jazz vocalist. She's 16, but she's in college on a pre-med track.
Oh my goodness.
So I tell people, no matter who you are, no matter what you do in life, these kids will make you feel inadequate. And she was on Oprah last year. And then we're closing with a kid named Chad Juros. He's 18 from the Atlantic City area. And he's a magician. He's also a cancer survivor. When he was diagnosed when he was, I think, 8, I want to say, his dad taught him magic when he was in the hospital. And he went through hell and back. He was finally cured. Then his dad died of a brain tumor shortly after he was cured. So now he does magic. He has his own foundation called the Spread the Magic Foundation, where he goes to pediatric cancer wards and performs. So a bunch of great kids donating their time. All of them are donating their time. We've had local organizations help us out. Travel agency in Monterey has donated all of the airfare. So we've had a lot of support from the community, and we're gonna have a good time and try and make a difference here.
What a terrific way to invest in something and have a good, enjoyable, entertaining evening to boot.
Absolutely.
Andrew, a couple more things. We also discussed last night, and this is a really provocative and interesting fact. When we go to England, when we would tour, we would usually impact the A-level exams.
Yeah.
And we in this country have become obsessed with tests and test taking, test receiving, You name it. We're,
Yeah.
we're testing everything. Could you give us an idea of the testing process? Is it important in Great Britain?
Yeah, it's important, and it's increasingly important to schools, to their esteem, because now we publish league tables of how the schools are doing at different stages. In primary school, what their results are at 7, what their results are at 11.
This is also with private schools as well.
Well, private schools are exempt some of that.
Okay.
And then in secondary schools, we test at 16 and 18, GCSE and A-level. GCSE is usually up to 10 subjects. A-level is usually 3 or 4. And this is where the difference occurs between much of the private sector and the state sector. The private sector is basically competing with each other. They're in one league. And the state sector is desperately, in some cases, trying to keep up, trying to do as well as possible in those GCSE and A-level results, because that's what the league tables are published by. So that's what tells the school, tells the public about the school, is this a good school or not a good school? So we're in the process now of looking for a school to send my son to. He'll have to put in this time next year, and he'll go in 2 years' time. And one of the things you look at is the league tables. Does this school get good GCSE and A-level results? But, and this is the big but, the best
depressingly
schools.
Familiar.
Yeah.
But, okay.
And that's sort of inevitable, but there's a very big but. The best schools have got themselves to a position where they begin not to take those exam results for granted, but to assume that if they're providing a good education, the exam results will follow. And then they will start to define themselves as a good school by what else they offer. How do they create the whole individual? So what do they do in music, or in drama, or in sports, or in clubs and societies, or journeys, or visits? What do they do in all those sorts of things to create the whole individual? And the big challenge for the state sector is to be able to do well enough in these exams, but also to start doing all these other things, not to become so obsessed with the exam results and the position of the league tables, but to try and do all these other things. And that's really the challenge for the state sector, is to get beyond the league tables and the results. And it's very interesting, when you go, as we are at the moment, because we're in the process of visiting schools and deciding for our son. And when you go to visit the private schools, the exam results are almost mentioned in passing. Oh yes, we got 95% A's to C's at A-level, or whatever it is. And these are all the other things we do.
Right.
And when you go to the state schools, it's almost the opposite thing. We want to tell you how brilliant our results are, and they break them down into all kinds of different ways of saying this is our value added, and this is how much better we did this year than last year, and all this kind of thing. And actually what you want to know is, what's the school about?
Yes.
What sort of people do we want to
Right,
create?
right.
And so you have this balance now between not wanting to be in a situation where you've got state-funded education, huge amounts of taxpayers' money, but nobody actually knows whether the school's any good or not, and a situation where the school is exercising all its activity just to try and make the bottom line look good. And there was a complete scandal a couple of years ago, where in order to show the percentages of success as being good, the school simply didn't enter some students for the exams. Or they didn't enter students in the core subjects. So they would enter them in design and technology, but not in mathematics. Because they knew they'd get an okay grade in design and technology, and mathematics might be a bit dodgy.
Yes.
So then we had a whole bunch of students leaving school at 16 or 18 who hadn't done enough mathematics.
It's been known to happen in this country as well, but not in this state.
Oh, absolutely not. But it's a problem for these schools. But we have to get to a situation where the best schools are the ones that parents are choosing, not simply because they happen to have good exam results, but because of the kind of individuals that they're able to turn out. And the thing that I think we have to forget is this isn't an either or. I think what's been learned in the top schools is that actually the children who do really well at sports or at music or in drama or these other activities, curiously, they're the ones who get the good exam results. I was recently talking to a man who was the Vice Chancellor of Cambridge University until a couple of years ago, Lord Alec Browers. And he was an engineer. And he said to me, when I was admitting students to Cambridge University for engineering, the first thing I wanted to know was how good they were at playing the violin. Not literally. He assumed
Yes.
that they were going to be reasonably good engineers.
Yes.
If they got to the point where they were applying for Cambridge University, their predicted grades at A-level were good enough. He said, what I wanted to know was what else did they have in their lives?
Yeah.
And I was more interested in their violin playing or their double bass playing or their drama or their, because I wanted human beings. I didn't want mathematics machines. And so in fact, the kids who succeed in all these other things are the same children, the same students who will succeed academically. And I don't think we've quite learned that with all the accent on accountability.
Well, we have a tendency to mimic the British system, especially in the private school system.
Well, mimic
here.
the good bits.
The good bits. And hopefully we're coming to the same conclusions in regards to the whole child rather than just bits and pieces that we go ahead and test like mad on. So hopefully that's a trend, and people are beginning to see the importance of reintroducing the arts, especially in this state, as we really haven't had all four of the arts in the public schools for close to 30 years. So under the auspices of the governor and some really good people in Sacramento, we're now starting to get that together. But anyway, thank you so much, Andrew, for being with us this afternoon. And
That's a pleasure.
Reed, back over to you one more time.
Yes.
We've got a bit here. How can we help?
Of course, by attending the show, helping spread the word about the show.
What if could we make a contribution?
Absolutely. Our website is letsbeatthis.org.
Letsbeatthis.org.
And we accept credit cards on that site for donations. And spreading the word is always very helpful about the event, about the need for funding for this cancer and for other pediatric cancers, because it's not getting the funding from the private sector or from the government that it needs.
Good, good. Well, thank you. Reed
Good luck.
Cavner
Thank you.
and Andrew Caspari, our dear friend from the BBC. And this is Local Legends. And we all know of local legends. And next week we're going to highlight Edie Karras, Morgan Stock, and Dale Leffler, very prominent people in the area performing arts. And for all of you out there, you know of some local legends, let us know. You can give us a call over here or email us, and that'll be at the end of the show. We'll give you those addresses. We learned the hard way. A good dear friend of mine, I don't know if you ever met Cole Weston.
Cole West, yeah.
And Cole was one heck of a character, and I always wanted to do this. I always wanted to archive it with this incredible, larger-than-life human being. And one day he was gone, and that was it. And all of that wealth of knowledge and experience was gone with him. So that's the motivation behind Local Legends.